Ted Baker, thanks for being on the Leadership Lounge podcast and letting me use the room at the Innovation Connector. And you're one of the influential people that helped me when I first started my business 12 years ago.
That long ago?
Yeah, that long ago when I was still at Ball State.
Yeah.
And I wanted to have you on because I think your story is really unique. You have a lot of good insight, and then this is what you do every day. Mm-hmm. You're here to offer a helping hand, a calming voice, and then help people to encourage them and to continue on the hard fight.
That's it right there.
Yeah. I like to always start from the beginning. So what did you want to do? Maybe walk through high school, college time frame, and then kind of walk through your careers and what you learned along the way.
Sure. So, well, thanks for having me, Zach. This is amazing. I love watching you grow as a business owner, and more so as a person. And so, you're solid. You've done well, and that's the reward we have to see you prosper and to see you grow as a person and then give back. And that's what you do every day. So, I believe from an early age, I was destined to a career of somewhat as an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. Although when I was growing up, we didn't even know what that word was. And so the entrepreneur word, I guess I didn't hear that until probably college. But really what entrepreneurism is really a lifestyle. It's a mindset, not just a study category or whatever. So, it all started when I was about 8 years old, honestly. I always had a knack for looking for a problem and then finding a solution for it.
Yeah.
And I grew up in a small town of Decatur, Indiana.
Yeah.
It was a farming community. And Decatur had the notoriety of having a very large bean and corn processing facility in Decatur. It was called Central Soya, which was just a really big company. And they were known for their big, what they called bean bowl. And it was a massive, it was massive back then, right? Yeah. And when the trucks came in, they unloaded their beans, and the beans went into this great big bowl, and it was just humongous. And at harvest time, and usually it was at a time when you don't get to pick when the harvest time comes. You pick when your beans are ready and ripe and such. And so the farmers would harvest their beans, and this was their payday. They would take it to Central Soya, they'd sell their beans, and this is how they made a living for the whole year.
Yeah.
Well, it was usually at a time in, let's say, October, usually early October. And there are times when early October, there's maybe a week or two when it gets real warm again and such. And it just seemed to be that was always that time of year. And I noticed that through our small town, these old bean trucks would line up through the town, down 5th Street, 4th Street, 3rd Street, 2nd, and then down 1st Street to where Central Soya was. And my home, where I lived and grew up, was only about maybe a half a mile from the facility. Yeah. Decatur wasn't that big to begin with. And so I noticed all these farmers just lined up, and they take their time, and it was a process. But remember, this is how they made their money. This was payday for them. Very important. So I thought to myself, man, these guys must be thirsty. And so what I did was I thought, well, maybe I can sell them some drinks along the way. Someone could have a Kool-Aid stand or whatever. But I thought, I'll have a delivery service. So what I did was the summer before I had this idea, I started getting Coca-Cola, which they didn't have much else, right?
Yeah.
So, I got the big bottles of Coca-Cola, and I would buy them on sale or have them bought on sale in the summer when they went on sale, and then I would store them in our basement at home. Well, when it came harvest time and the trucks started lining up, and of course, I was still in school. I was 8 years old, and I couldn't quit to do my business yet. But I would run home after school, and I would go downstairs because I had put them on ice the night before or whatever. We had these big troughs, and I would put them in my wagon, literally my red wagon, and I would put as many bottles, cases that I could in there, and they came in like 8 packs. Yeah. And I would take them out, and I'd just start walking down the street selling my Coca-Cola. And I'd always tell people before that I sold Coke on the street, right? Yeah. And they'd go look at me, and I'd say, what are you thinking about? It's Coca-Cola, not, what do you think? But the idea was I just wanted to serve them where they were. And boy, was it a hit. and I would sell them for $0.25 a bottle, and it was very refreshing. And I would go as far as I could until I ran out, and then I'd go back and load up more, and I just kept doing that. And so, that's kind of what I did, and I did that until the season ran out. Now, here's the interesting thing. I think of innovation, right? So I knew I was going to be something different because, like, it was we had to pay a penny a bottle deposit, and I thought, I don't want to lose that. So I asked the farmers just to throw it up to the lawn of the home next to where they were because it wouldn't break in the grass, right? And then as I moved back home, or on back way, the way back, I'd pick up the bottles, and then I could get that penny deposit. Because see, it's not what you earn; it's what you keep.
Yeah.
And so I did that. I also learned a lesson about. I had an angel investor through this whole process. Her name was Mom, but she did a really good job, and I love that. The other thing that I've learned about innovation is it's simple, and for me, it was important that it was in the day when they didn't have like twist tops or the type of thing. You had to use a bottle opener to open these. Well, that was like a key to my business. And so I got a bottle opener and put it on a string, tied it on my belt, because if I lost it, that'd be the end of my business, right? So I did that. And so I learned early on that those little things were important, but serving the customer where they were was really important.
That's extremely advanced for an 8-year-old to think through all of those problems. Did you have any, was your mom or dad helping you solve any of these problems, or was that's what you were thinking?
That was me. I think my dad had an entrepreneurial leaning to him, but this was just all me dreaming. And I'd lay in bed at night and just think about this stuff. And then I learned a valuable lesson about American entrepreneurship and capitalism, and that is my first season, I made about $50 profit. That was a lot of Coca-Cola, right?
Yeah.
And I did pay my mom back. We kept track of that because I wanted to do it right, because I needed her for the next season.
Yeah.
Right? And so I'd always ask people, what do you think I did with my $50? And I'll go to classes and talk about that at Ball State or wherever, and they'll say, well, you saved it up so you could buy some for the next year, or you invested it, or whatever. And I said, yeah, all that sounds good, but I became American capitalist at that point, and I bought a new bicycle with it. So I spent it, so anyway, but I had the money to do that, right? So after that, I got a paper out, and that was, I was in 6th grade at the time. Now it's funny because I passed paper and delivered paper 7 days a week, 365 days a year. It was a Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette and was a morning paper. I got up at 5 o'clock every morning, got to the place where the papers were dropped off. I folded them, and then I passed out papers to 118 homes every day on my bike, and I had my German Shepherd dog ran alongside me. Now, I got to thinking about this. How many parents of 6th graders today would let their kid go out at 5 in the morning on their own in the dark, but it was a different day. And one of the things that I found out about that whole experience was, I wanted to earn some money. I didn't have any lofty goals, but it was nice to have a little money in your pocket. And I made about $30 every 2 weeks. But the interesting thing about having a paper route at that point was I had to collect the money. And, I had to collect the money for the paper, because that was part of the responsibility. And you had to go out after you delivered paper, because I delivered papers at 5 and 6 in the morning. So it was usually after school or on Saturdays, never on Sundays. You did not do anything like that on Sundays.
Yeah.
But I would have to go out, knock on doors, ask for it, and they wouldn't be home, or you're interrupting their dinner or whatever, because I was still in school. And it was kind of a pain, because in 6th grade was the beginning of middle school for us, and we could play sports.
Yeah.
And sports practiced after school and in the evenings. And so what am I going to do? So I thought, I have to have a solution to this. So what I did, and at that time they had these little paper tickets. They were like little rectangle things that gave the dates of their service, right? And so, and you tore them off out of this book and such. So I asked my dad, who worked in an office, I said, Dad, I've written a letter as a 6th grader. And what it does is explains to each customer and what I want them to do. And so I said, could you mimeograph these off for me so you can know how old this was? But they didn't have copiers. They had mimeograph machines. And so he did. And basically what it was is I put them in an envelope, and I put the customer name on each envelope, so 118 of them, and it just said, dear customer or whatever, in order to serve you better and to not take you away from dinner or whatever, or if I miss you, I have enclosed the ticket for your payment. But what I'd like you to do is just put your money inside the envelope and just leave it in the door, and I'll collect it the next morning. Well, it just served two purposes.
Yeah.
It took care of the customer because then they didn't have to worry about it. And then the second thing is then I could play sports, right? Yeah. And I didn't have to take up Saturdays and do this. The brilliant part of all this was, and this was before, so I think I started the payment ahead of time, the payment online stuff. I think I really was a precursor to all that stuff because now it's all online. But the beautiful part of that, and I didn't realize until afterwards, a 2-week, the cost of getting the paper delivered 7 days a week for 2 weeks was $1.80. That's what the bill was. Guess what they put in the envelope every time?
$2.
$2. 20-cent tip per customer every 2 weeks. And I'm telling you, it was like clockwork. So I thought, that's pretty cool. And so we just kept doing that and kept doing that. So again, that was an innovation. That was a creative way to make money and to serve. But I really thought about, I did it for me because of sports, and stuff. Yeah. But after I thought about it, I said, well, this is really helping those people too, because they're not bound by, they're not going to be here, or I'm going to be eating dinner or whatever. Because those were really sacred times back in the day.
Yeah, I love you talking about, and you said something that made me mourn a little bit for that time that you had. It was like, no, I would never let my kid go do a paper route.
We were all innocent.
Yeah, it was such an innocent time. And the other day, so my oldest son is 8, almost 9, and this is the first season he's push mowing our yard.
So you identified with my age.
Yeah. And he's doing a pretty good job, and it's kind of a fight to get him to get out there. But the other day, this gentleman stops by in our garage, which was odd. But a guy who lives in the neighborhood, he's like, I just want to tell you guys, your son mowing just gave me hope in this next generation. Aww. That there's families. And realizing how much that is going to be important to him and his development. And but yeah, I'm mourning that period. I'm sure that gentleman as well was like, I remember when there were jobs for young kids.
Correct.
And there aren't anymore. Well,
if there's a lemonade stand or kids selling cookies or whatever, and I'm driving by, I'll guarantee you, I stop. And I usually go way overboard, but, I'm thinking, that's me back then. And, you mentioned mowing lawns for your son. I mowed like 3 or 4 lawns a week too, as I was doing this. And that was as I got a little older. And I can remember, I had a push mower. And my dad was so kind because he would always make sure the gas tank was full.
Yeah.
And I remember getting on my bike, holding the mower back here and rolling the mower behind me and such. But those were good days. But what it all taught me was, and I think this was the influence from my father, was you had to work hard.
Yeah.
And you had to show up all the time. So if the lawns need to be mowed, and back then, the lawns I had were usually an elderly lady or whatever, and they liked routine.
Yep.
And especially they loved their lawns to look nice for the weekends.
Yeah.
Because that's when people got out and did things. And so if it was a Friday after school or Friday in the summer, and my friends said, hey, let's go play baseball. And I'd say, well, you know what? I've got to go mow. Because I didn't have the option of not doing it because I had to show up every time. And my dad taught me that. And my mom, she never worked a day outside of the home. I mean, she raised 6 kids, so she worked harder than anybody that I know. But my dad taught me that because he was a very, very hard worker, and he was a manager in a large company, and so he did very well. But boy, he worked hard, and I knew that. And he taught me that if you want something, you've got to go for it, and then work hard and see what happens. So I'm grateful for that upbringing. And I have a twin sister, and she at the time too was very creative in what she did, and she did her own little things. But she liked to play a lot more than me. So anyway.
Yeah, I think that delayed gratification, learning that at a young age is really important. Like you brought up the lemonade stand, and we do 1 or 2 of those a summer with our kids. And my one son, he's got they set up the table, and we're kind of in a neighborhood or whatever. And they're not getting a good conversion rate at a higher level for the kids.
Yep.
And my wife and my one middle son, he wants to learn how to make money. It's interesting. He just took the sign and went out to the road and started waving at the cars.
You go.
And then they all start rolling through. And that lesson he just learned, because he was bummed. He was like, why aren't they coming? They can't really see you. He learned a marketing lesson there. He learned putting yourself out there. Relationships, waving. Like, he learned an important lesson, and that will probably be with him the rest of his life.
Yeah. And, it's interesting too, because as an adult, kids pull on your heartstrings too. And so when you see that, you go, oh, well, and then you go spend your money. It's very interesting because this all carried over into my high school life.
Yeah.
And my parents, other than us working in a summer, and I was a swimmer in hye school. And so being a lifeguard at the pool right across the street, the community pool was, in the cards for me. And I did that. But my parents didn't really want me to work during school time because that was a time to participate in, whatever it would be, if it's, drama, choir, sports, whatever we wanted. And they were pretty faithful to that. My parents said, we'll supply the car, which for 4 drivers in our family, we had 1 car. And my dad said, we'll all be fine with this, and there will be no fights. There'll be no arguments, and there'll be no contention. If there is, nobody drives. And so guess what? In all the years that we had, all the years I could drive and we're at home, we never had one fight about a car because we knew my dad was true to that word. And so, but I remember thinking about this as even when I was swimming, I was an extremely hard worker in practice.
Yeah.
And I think that all goes back to that 8-year-old time period and passing papers and showing up and giving it all you got, because what you put into it is what you got out of it.
Yeah.
What the input was the output. And so, early on I started setting school records and swimming and such, but I wasn't a gifted swimmer. I just worked hard.
Yeah.
And so I think I did that through my life.
Yeah. I think that's something that I would take hard working over talent any day. Because, there's plenty of people who are talented, but if you don't know how to hone that and turn that into revenue and output, it's like it doesn't matter.
Yeah, hard work is a valuable thing. And I hear people talking about, well, this generation, they just don't know how to work and such. And I really point the fingers at the generation before.
Yeah.
Because we've not taught them well. That's why I love just hearing the story about your son and mowing and stuff like that, because we have to teach them, and we have to teach them how to be hard workers. We had chores at home, and we lived in town and such, but we had these 3 huge walnut trees in our yard, and every other year they produced a bumper crop of walnuts, and you couldn't rake them up. They had to be picked up by hand, and that was my twin sister and I's responsibility. We had to keep the yard clean. It was awful work. It was terrible, but it was required of us. Yeah. We learned how to clean and dust baseboards in our home, in the house. Mom taught us, because Mom said, I don't know if you're going to be single all your life. I don't know what, but you're going to need to clean. She would teach us how to mop. We didn't ever use a mop, though. We had to get on our hands and knees, because how can you see the dirt from up there? You have to get down where you can see it. Making our beds. And my parents were not strict. They just taught us. Yeah. This was expected of us. And this is, and until the day I was married and moved out of the house, I had to do dishes every meal. That was part of my job. I did the dishes. Mom worked hard to cook the meal. She was a great cook, but she decided that every time she cooked, she had to use every pots and pan, I think. But the whole idea was that was our responsibility. I never questioned it. I never thought anything else. I think it's a parent's responsibility to teach and train your children because they're going to learn from us more than they're going to learn from anybody else.
Yeah, I've seen that psychology with my own kids. Kids want to be helpful.
Yes.
They do, like including them and even jobs that it might seem above their age group, but like teaching them, they want to do that. Mm-hmm. And, there's a famous pastor, he talked about his oldest daughter leaving and how he was mourning that. And he goes, all of my kids are so helpful because I raised them to be assets, not liabilities. And I've really kind of taken that to heart of spend time, and we're not perfect at it by any means. And we're consistently fighting our kids to be
right.
helpful, and to do things. But
Yeah.
that's a discipline of ours.
Yeah.
We're working hard.
I had to learn that, and usually you learned it through discipline. That I had to do that. I found an interesting situation. I have grandkids, and two of my granddaughters, they're at our house, and they can be, let's say, destructors of the house. And so there's toys, there's puzzles, there's dress up things, there's dolls, and there's blocks and all this. And I went down in our basement, our lower level, and it was a disaster area. And the two girls had been down there a long time. And they were getting ready to leave. And I said, don't we have something that we have to do? And they said, what? And I said, well, I know you guys didn't make all the mess, but we need to, the downstairs needs to be cleaned up before you leave. And they were like, and I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'm gonna give you an incentive. I'm gonna give you each $3. And I mean, like they were, 5 and 6 or whatever. I said, I'm gonna give you each $3 and I want you to do a good job. And they go, oh, okay. Cause they thought that was cool. Because I think they knew they were going to have to do it anyway. So if they could earn a little money. And so I heard them walking down the stairs, and one of my granddaughters said to her cousin, the other granddaughter said, let's do a really good job because he'll probably tip us. So, but the whole point was they did it. They excelled at it. They did a great job, and I appreciated it. And then the other thing is, then I walked around like to their moms, to their dads, to my wife, to the grandma, and just bragged on them how great a job they did. I never mentioned the money though. And so, they got puffed up a little bit, but that sets the tone for so many things in their life. And again, I like what you said. We're not perfect at it. I failed because sometimes I'll say, you clean that up or you're not coming back. And, anyway, because we're human.
Yeah. So you're in high school. And I love what you said about your parents really wanting you guys to have like a work-life balance early on. Because, there can be a sense of you only get one childhood. You only get one time in high school to experience. And I think sometimes when you're an entrepreneur or you have that mindset, you can lose that.
Correct.
So you go from high school. What did you want to do after that point? You go to college. What was your goal?
Well, I wanted to go to college and I wanted to go into business. And you got to realize this was back in 1976. Well, I went to college a long time ago. And I went to Ball State University, and that was my first choice. I was offered a swimming scholarship to Notre Dame. And I thought that was pretty good. I could get in there and all that. I had very good academics. But a swimming scholarship at Notre Dame for a minor sport like that was $200 per year. That was all you could get.
Yeah.
And my dad was getting ready to retire in a couple years, and I didn't want to put that on him because a lot of times the parents would pay and you would pay your own. And so I did have a full ride academic scholarship to Ball State, room and board, academics and everything. So I just thought, that's more practical. So, that was a lesson I learned is that I can get a really good education elsewhere. Yeah. And then I did join the swim team, and it was good for the coach because I did make the swim team, but I didn't take up a scholarship. Yeah. And he loved that, right? So, and I only swam for 1 year because I really wanted to excel academically. And, there's not a large, there's no, national swimming league that you're going to sign $1 million contract or anything. But I was never going to be that good. And so I really wanted to participate. But I did want to go to college to learn business. And honestly, there were not that many options as far as business. You got, I went into marketing because that was it was marketing, management, or accounting. That was about it. Yeah. And in the marketing sector was sales and all the other things. So that's what I pursued. And I really wanted to because I wanted to follow in my dad's footsteps. He was a really good business person and he was a kind person. And I thought, if I can do that, that would be good. So, and again, with Ball State, and when you go to any major university, your first couple years, you're really not in your major very much. You get a taste of a class here or there. And so that was the time when I really participated in activities, got to know friends and such. I made it a point to live in the dorm, and I lived in the dorm 3 years. First of all, I just thought it was a better path. And second of all, I was a growing boy, and the dorm had the food. They had all you could eat. And it wasn't like all the good food you could eat. It was just all you could eat. Quantity over quality is important. Yeah. So, but it was all done for me, and I really appreciated it. But I loved investing in other people too. And so my path in marketing, my junior year, I got really, really involved in the marketing program.
Yeah.
Senior year, the same way. And I had one of those, people call them aha moments. I don't really care about saying that, but it was one of those landmark times that you're going to plant your stake in and you're going to go forever and ever. I'm going to look back and say, that was a moment.
Yeah.
And it was during my junior year, and I was just getting into the business classes. And I received in a class, we had homework assignment that we had to read this, it was a mimeographed like case study, and then we had to report on this. And all I can remember was it was about a company called, what was it? American General or something like that. But they made cars. And they're an early car company. And it showed their, like a corporate office, and there was this picture on there, and it showed this massive room. It seemed massive at the time, right?
Yeah.
And there were cubicles everywhere. Cubicles, and there were people sitting in the cubicles, and it seemed like the guys all had white shirts on, and they were all office people, and the ladies were prim and proper, but there are tons of people in there on these cubicles. And so I'm reading this article, and I see these people in these cubicles, and where I was reading this was at Bracken Library on the 3rd floor, and I can take you to the exact spot because not too long ago I went over there to relive this, and excuse me, there was and where I was reading this was in a cubicle. And they had these low cubicles with little chairs. And I was reading that, and I saw myself in this cubicle, and then I saw myself in one of those cubicles that those people were working in. And there was something that rose up inside of me. And I can get emotional about saying this, but there's something that rose up inside of me that said what I was going to do. And I said, I wanted to stand up on top of that cubicle desk, and I wanted to scream at the top of my lungs, no, because I didn't want to end up there. That was not going to be for me. So, but being the kind person that I was, I did not do that because I was in a library. Yeah. But internally, I yelled no as loud as you could. And from that moment on, it just seemed like the tide turned for me, is that's not the way I was going to grow up and be in business. Now, I didn't have anything against them. It just wasn't me. And so that path started taking me onto some different journeys, things like that. I knew, and this is what it told me early on, I'm not going to be normal. I'm not going to be your regular old business guy. Something was different, and I was not going to live like one of those people in the cubicle.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, you kind of talked about like college, and this is like a saying I kind of live by, is you get what you look at. You always find what you're looking for. If you go to, it doesn't matter what college you go to. If you're looking for a good education, you're going to find it. If you're looking to party in college, doesn't matter where you go, you're going to find it. You can go to a private school, you'll find it. That's right. You're looking to, if you're looking to build a good community of people, you're going to find it.
That's right.
And I think that's kind of underrated. Everyone's like, oh, you got to go to this great college. Like, sure, there is some benefit to, these different, colleges. But if you look at a lot of these entrepreneurs that go and have great companies, they didn't go to just some crazy colleges there.
Sure.
They found what they were looking for in that drive. So,
well, during that time too, and you probably experienced this too, and that is really when I went to Ball State my freshman year, my parents, and I was the first of their kids who really engaged in college. And my twin sister and I were the youngest. She went a week after me. She went to Franklin College. And so, but I went a week before. So I said, hey, I'm the first, right? So anyway, I think I had a brother that went to Vincennes or Indiana State for a semester. I won't count that. But I was the first one to graduate in my family from college. And I remember my parents dropping me off, and I realized, heck, I hadn't really been away from home at all like that. I was on my own. And when they dropped me off at the dorm, and we unloaded stuff and we went out to eat, and then they brought me back to the dorm and shut the door, and I waved goodbye, and I'm going, I'm on my own now, And so I thought, okay, it's up to you to take care of this. And it's just like what you probably have done is this is a time where we start discovering who we really are. We have a little, we want to find out how we live, who we are, what really makes us tick, because I no longer had the direct accountability to my parents who could see what I'm doing. But I still had them, around me, and I had them in my mind and in my heart, kind of, because I knew that I was still responsible to them. But I had to learn that, I was, who I was as a person. And it was really early on, like in my sophomore year, it was so, can I talk about a little bit of faith on this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. No.
I knew I could. But,
Yeah.
So I was raised Roman Catholic, and I'm so grateful for that upbringing because we were very faithful. Our family was a family that sought God.
Yeah.
It was just, in that way, I'm very faithful to the church and who we were as believers and Christians. But I knew there was a lot more somewhere. Yeah. So, but I remember when I went to Ball State, I had this rosary. I don't know if a lot of people don't even know what they are anymore, but I received it when I received my first communion when I was in second grade, and I brought that with me to college.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think it was ever out of the box since second grade, okay? But I when I was going through a drawer, I thought, when I go to Ball State, so when I leave, I'm taking God with me. And that was just kind of a symbolic thing.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I didn't know what that meant. I had no clue what that meant. It was just arranged such that I took, was it potluck, or I did not assign a roommate ahead of time. And so the roommate I had was, his name is Dale Dart. And I used to call him Dale Dork because that's what he was in my mind. Right? But we got along fine. It was just kind of a really goofy, odd kid. But when the lights went out at night and we were just laying there, he would ask me questions about my faith. He had a different faith than I did. He seemed to have a personal relationship with someone that I knew of, but I didn't have a personal relationship with.
Yeah.
So we were just sitting there, we'd lay there talking, and boy, he bugged me. He just drove me crazy because he was questioning, but not in a negative way. He was just having me question, well, is this all you're going to do? Is this all the faith you're going to, and all the stuff and about my faith and such? But he never downplayed it. He just was showing me that there might be more. And he invited me that year in early October to a showing of a movie that Campus Crusade put on. It was called What If I Should Die? And the idea is you're in a car wreck, and if that was you, what would happen? Would you go to heaven tonight? And he invited me, and I told him, I will never go to something like that with you. I will never do it. And I was honest. I went by myself. I didn't go with him. And what I did is I snuck in, and it was at Pruis Hall.
Yeah.
And I can take you to the seat. It was the second to top row on the way right side, second seat in. I sat there by myself. I was in an event there a couple years ago, and I went up there and sat in that seat just because so the movie went on, and nobody was around me that I knew. I was surrounded with people. It was full. Yeah. And I had the opportunity at that time to ask Jesus to be my Lord and Savior. And so I did. I didn't even know what it really meant, but I thought, this is for me. And I can say from that time, there's been no looking back. I've got a hold of something in my heart. And what that has done, though, is that he's promised to walk with us every day. And I found out that means in school, in business, friendships, marriage, parenthood. He chooses us, and then he walks with us. And so as I was growing my business acumen, and as I was getting ready for my first job out of college, and marriage and children, I found out that God was with me every step of the way. And I could ask him for guidance, but it was also a moral compass for me. And so as I was going through these things, I think it helped me be stabilized in a way. And so there were never questions about doing things wrong or illegally, which I don't think I would have done anyway, but there was a compass that I could follow, and it was inside of me. And so from that early time, I had two things that I promised myself that if I was ever in business, or if I ever owned a business, first thing was I was always going to be kind to people, customers, employees, or whatever. And then the second thing that I always wanted to do was that I wanted to make sure that I took time to to commit my days, commit my ways to Him, to the Lord. And I never wore it out here. I didn't put it, I just lived my life. And so when you start treating people kindly and He starts leading and guiding you, I don't know how to say it other way, but He kind of walks with us. And so that was a real important part of my life. And again, I think God blesses it. There's a lot of people God bless and weren't in my situation and such. But I chose that path, and it's been a very good path for me. I've never looked back, and I can say that as I look back, He's led me and guided me in like all my different positions that I've had, and buying a business and working in a business and having a certain owner and timing to be here and there. Always has been there, but and I'm thankful for that. But I think there's a lot to that, allowing me to have some stability and have that compass to make sure that and the other thing is I always said, whatever I'm going to do with excellence, and whatever I'm going to do the right thing no matter what people say.
Yeah,
that's gotten me in a lot of trouble sometimes, but I'll never go back.
Yeah, that's great. So you leave college. What's kind of your first job, and what do you get into? And then what are some like big, maybe hard lessons you learned pretty early on?
Oh, that's a loaded question. That's a good question. So right before my senior year, I got married.
Me too.
Yeah. And I had been going with this girl since my sophomore year in high school. And, we were close, but, she was a swimmer. She actually swam at Ball State too. Same high school. She went to Ball State. She was a year ahead of me. So the week after she graduated, we got married. And there were lots of reasons. It was just timing and such. But so there was a little part of me that like I kind of have to earn a living here, So even when I was in school, I had a scholarship, and so we thought maybe because she was going to be a teacher, she had graduated, and we thought, well, she would teach and have some money coming in so that I could go to school and finish up and such. And then about 6 weeks after we were married, or about 8 weeks after we were married, we found out that we were having our first child. And our first child was born 10 months after we were married. And which was good. I mean, it wouldn't have happened any sooner, but it made everybody who was gone, back then, so all the doubters we were good. But so my first job really, and I did a lot of odd jobs in college just to keep by. But my first job out of college was working for a company in Anderson, Indiana. And I was a sales representative engineer for a company that sold springs to the upholstered furniture industry, which is really crazy, but because it's just business, right? Yeah. Well, it was kind of interesting. I graduated in 1980. Excuse me. And if you go back and look in the news back in 1979 and 80, the economy was horrible. And I can remember the spring semester or spring quarter, because we were in quarters then. And we lived in the Married Housing Shiloh Apartments. You probably know where they're at. And every morning I would get on the shuttle, take it into campus. And I can remember getting on the shuttle one time, and it was standing room only, and I was standing on. It's kind of like what people now go on a subway or whatever. You always see the same people, Yeah. And I'm standing there, and another guy who's on the shuttle every morning with me. He was standing next to me, and he had the Ball State Daily News, which was our newspaper. He had it in his hand, and I'll never forget this. He shook it in front of my face. And he goes, "What are we going to do about this?" And boy, was he angry. And he said it again, "What are we going to do about this?" And so he opened a paper, and the headlines it was something like this: "Few jobs await college seniors." And he was scared, right? And I looked at him, and it was one of those things that just rise up inside of me. It's like, that was genius to say. I didn't think of it on my own. I don't know what happened, but I looked at him and I said, I said, "That's okay. I only need one job. If there are a few, I only need one of them." And by golly, Ball State would always bring in companies to interview seniors and such. Yeah. And that year they had the lowest number, just a few companies come in because there weren't any jobs. And there was this company from Anderson who was looking for one employee. And I was one of two people through the Ball State Placement Office that got a job that year. All I needed was one, right? And so I worked there, And I worked there because I had a responsibility to my family. It wasn't something I probably thought I would do forever, but I made okay money, and I needed to work, and because I had a family, and that was a responsibility, and that goes back to that hard work, being responsible. So it didn't go very well. I had a really mean sales manager who was just using me. He would take me out on the road with him on Monday morning and come back Friday afternoon every week, and that was just not good for our marriage. And I had a little daughter, and it just wasn't working. So after 6 months, I went to the not him. I went to the president of the company, who was really kind to me, and I just said, "Look, this just isn't working out. It's not working out for me, and it's not going to work out for you either." So I said, "I'm leaving," and so he said, "Well, I'll tell you what. I'll pay you for 2 weeks, but you don't have to come back in." So I took him up on that. And that was a really hard thing because, like, I didn't have anything lined up. And I would always recommend, don't quit a job if you don't have another one. But it was really hard. I just couldn't do it. And so what happened was, okay, I got to find a job. And so I sold commission. I sold electrical supplies, light bulbs, ballasts for an electrical supply company here in Muncie on commission only. And, the first day I made like $500 commission.
Wow.
I'm thinking, this is going to be great. This is going to be awesome, because I was good at it, right? And for the next 3 weeks, I didn't get one penny commission. So, I learned, and even though I worked just as hard every day, but that eventually led to me landing a job in Muncie with the mentor of my life. And it was an odd circumstance because I was looking around for a full-time job, and in the south side of Muncie, there was a restaurant called Rack's Restaurant. It was like a precursor to Arby's and such. And I loved that place, but they were looking for an assistant manager. And I thought, well, I'll work the restaurant business. I got to have a full-time job for my family. And so I had an interview one morning, and I was still selling commission because I couldn't do what I wanted. And I went over to this interview at Rack's, and it was like 9 o'clock in the morning before they opened, and a bunch of police cars were there and all this stuff. And the manager came out and said, "Hey, look, we can't meet today." He said, "We were robbed early this morning when we were, when I was here." And he said, "We're just not opening. So we're going to have to reschedule." So, okay. So I looked on my client list for my sales, and there was a company just a couple blocks away that had bought something from us before. So I went over there and just stopped in. And as I was waiting in the office of the guy who owned the company, he got a call, and he took the call, and he was talking to somebody from an employment service, and he said, "Yes, I'm looking for someone." And he started telling the type of person he wanted. And that person the type of person he wanted and the skill set he needed was sitting right next to him. And that was me. So when he got off the phone, I said, "Sir, you don't have to wait for her call. You don't have to wait for a response. I'm your person." And so we talked, and I started. That was a Friday. I started Monday. And that single move changed the whole course of my entrepreneurial life because I started working for someone who was more entrepreneurial than I was. Yeah. And he believed in me, and he gave me opportunities. And I ended up working for him for 18 years. And it was a training ground like you could never get anywhere else. And he entrusted, when I first started, we did about $800,000 worth of business. This was a manufacturing company, and I led the operations. And by the time I left, within about 5 years, we were doing almost $10 million in sales. Wow. And I just kept pushing and pushing. And so we had a great relationship. So, and that led to more things. And, but I'll never forget what that man did for me. He just was an example of honesty, integrity, real entrepreneurial spirit. He taught me how to take care of a customer, how to love employees and make sure that you did them right. It wasn't about him. He told me a valuable lesson, and I try to tell people this too. He said, "Ted," he goes, "I've been very successful in my career." And he said, "You helped make me successful because you got these sales up like crazy." But he said, "One of the things that I do," and he said, "This is one thing I want to impart to you, is that for you to be successful and to be very successful, you have to make other people around you successful." Yeah. It's not about only me. It's about how I serve the people I work with. And I learned that in all the companies that I've owned and managed and such. That stuck with me from the beginning. And so that's a valuable lesson for a lot of people because it's like you're climbing up that ladder and it's about me. Well, no, it isn't. it's about the journey upward with other people. So
Yeah.
I've never known anybody to do it by themselves.
No. Yeah, I had a really good interview with a tech director at a school, and I said, like, how, what's some advice you would give to other tech directors? And they said very simply, make the superintendent look good.
Yeah,
That's your job.
Yes, that's right.
And it wasn't that you're like praising that position, but it's like, if you are doing that, they will make sure that you look good.
Yeah.
And, doing that for other people is so important.
So this journey that I was on with this 18-year journey, I was getting a little restless. I had a lot of experience, and it was sensed that I had the experience, the knowledge, the know-how to do some things on my own. What I didn't have was like the opportunity, what I was going to do. And it seemed like and this guy that was my mentor, the owner of this company, he was older. He was in his 70s already. And it seemed like he was trying to bring his ship into the harbor, and I was passing his ship because I was going out to sea, right? And so one day I received a call, or actually it was one of the earliest emails you could ever imagine. It was an early email on my AOL account that I had to pay for. It's crazy. And I got an email from a friend who had worked in that company with me, that company for a few years. And he went out on his own, and he was a contemporary Christian recording artist and had done very well.
Yeah.
And we were good friends, but he emailed me and said, "Hey, are you looking for a position?" And he was kind of like an ad, and he was kind of crazy. He was just doing it for fun. But he was serious, and he was looking for someone to help take him and his concert routine from small auditoriums or small churches and churches into large auditoriums and to arenas, because that's how he was getting very well known. And so he asked me if I'd join him and run his operations. And so I went to my boss and I said, "Jim, I don't know how to tell you this, but I love you." I was my boss, and I said, "I don't know how to ever thank you for what I'm doing, for what I've done, but I think the time has come for me to leave."
Yep.
And then I said, "I'm not doing this out of spite," and he knew Ray, the guy who was singing. He knew him, and actually I'd worked with him, for a while. And he goes, "Well, you're doing the right thing."
Yeah.
So he blessed me basically on the way out, and so I started a journey, an 8-year journey working with this singer, and I was a tour manager, and I also took care of the finances for this group, and so I traveled a lot, but we just traveled like 3 days a week, and so that was really doable. So I left on a Friday. On Tuesday, Ray and I, we had an office here in Muncie, and we had one in Nashville. He said, "Let's go to Nashville and kind of connect with the Nashville office, and I want them to know who you are because you're going to be their boss."
Yeah.
So we went down to Nashville, and I got back to our Courtyard by Marriott in Franklin, Tennessee. I'll never forget. It's like I can go right to the room, and there was a message waiting on my phone in the room, and I'm going, "This is crazy. I don't know who," and it was a message from Jim. I don't know how he found me. I don't have any clue how he did that. And he said, "Ted, if you are still interested in maybe buying part of my company, I'm probably able to." And you could tell he was talking like this. He was like nervous.
Yeah.
He said, "I'd be maybe interested in talking." The tide turned then, and so I said, "Okay." And so I called him back and I said, "Look, I'm going to be back in Muncie on Friday, and let's sit down and talk about it." So we did, and so knowing the business real well, his business, I thought, I'll pick the parts that I know make money, right? And I knew the operations well. And so, I was working with the singer for one day, basically. And so I went to Ray, the singer, and I said, "Hey, why don't we buy this company together?" So he and I became 50-50 partners. We bought out about a half of this guy's business. And so what I did is I became the managing partner of the business, and I still then also was the tour manager. So I ran 2 full-time jobs for 8 years.
Jeez.
But part of that was that I was we had family growing, we're getting kids ready for college. That time was all happening, and so let's just say Ted needs the money, right? And so working hard was not a hard thing for me to do. I knew how to do it, and so with the blessing of my wife, and it was hard to leave and things like that, but I made really good money. And then it came a time after about 8 years. I said, Ray, I got to be done. I think I could make us more money because I've got all your situation all set up.
Yeah.
I can make us more money by being full time. And so that's what I did. And so to this day, he and I are still great friends. And he's kind of retired from the music business. And Jim, my former boss, in the manufacturing company that we bought, he's passed away. I mean, he ended up dying at 92.
Wow.
But he never lost his vision for more. And I can remember about a week before he passed away, I went out to the extended care facility where he was. His wife had already passed away. And I sat there on the bed with him. And I was so grateful for this because it was his last good day before he kind of went, incoherent. And we spent 2 hours talking about what we are going to do when he was able to leave that facility and to start another business. And so, I thought, man, he's 92, he's dying, but here he was, still had hope and such. And so, so I continued to grow that business for quite some time.
Yeah. So, that's interesting because I don't even know what's the process work like. I don't know if you had that forethought to have some sort of succession plan, because I don't know if there's a kid that ends up getting his 50% ownership if his wife already passed away. What was that transition like? How did you?
Well, first back then, you bought a business and you're growing it, and we grew it quite a bit. And the singer, 50% owner there, he showed up in 8 years. He showed up in the business 3 times. So he was an equity partner. We were 50-50 partners, but I earned a good salary by running the place. And at first it's like, this is cool. Let's do this. And I remember walking out of, the closing of this, and, Ray and I each gave us high fives. We just had a fun time. Like, we're doing this, But so our goal was just to get it going.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, after 8-9 years of being in the business together, Ray and his wife were going to get a divorce.
Yeah.
And so what happened was he needed, because basically we owned each 50% of the company. But in Indiana, his wife owned 50% of his 50%, and so he was going to have to pay her 50% of the value of the company. Well, anybody in business knows that you don't have that kind of money just sitting around, because it's always moving in the business, and you put it back in the business. And so I kind of came up to the thing. I said, "I'll buy your company." The side he didn't want that. He just didn't want me to have it for some reason. And so I said, "Well, we're going to have to sell the company." And so it was a little depression going on at that time for me, because I thought, this is my baby and such. But, I just committed it to every step that I had with God. I didn't know what was next. And but I had previously, for like the past year or two, I was kind of setting it up to be sold.
Yeah.
Now, it was a business model. It wasn't that I was going to. So long story short, I came across a guy who owned a business, a major company, who had a division that did some of the things that we did in our type of business. And I had better technology and better people than he had.
Yeah.
And he sat next to me at this meeting, just out of random. He sat next to me at this luncheon meeting. He goes, "Baker, if you ever want to sell your company, let's talk."
And that was a year prior.
Yeah. And so, this was after Ray wanted to sell. We had to sell. And so, but I was prepared for it at that time. And I said, "I'll call you when I get back to the office," or whatever. And so 2 days later we met, and I had all the documents ready. I had everything, because I was already prepared. And they ended up buying the company from us. And so it was a nice landing for both of us. We didn't get rich, but this was right before, this was 6 months before the Great Recession starting in 2008.
Really?
My company I was too small. I would never have made it. And the largest customer we had went bankrupt during the recession. And I was free of all that.
Wow.
Now, his company, the guy that bought it, was big enough that he was able to weather all that storm. And the technology that we provided to them and the people was something that he could use in another area. And so, some of that is that was pretty good. Thanks, Lord. And there's a Bible verse that says the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord. And I just thought maybe he was ordering my steps. He was providing something I didn't know. Yeah. Nobody knew a recession was coming. So, and I didn't get rich, not by any means.
I think that's a misconception in business. It's like by the time you pay, if you have any sort of loans, taxes, if you have partners, a lot of times you have you have people who have supported you. You want to make sure that they're paid, employees.
Yeah. So you're right. Now I had a little nest egg, and it was nice to put away, but yeah, I wasn't rich. And my thought was this was like the end of October. And I thought, I'm going to spend maybe the next 3-4 months just closing out the company from my end. And I had an office at home, and I was going to do this. And the day I sold it, I never walked back in that company. He didn't need me because he was doing similar things. So I thought, I'll work from home and I'll close out the company. We had to do the final payroll and all this stuff. And 3 days after I sold the company, I was already bored because I had everything done.
Yeah.
And so what am I going to do? And so I just was looking around and thinking, well, first of all, this is like November, early November. And I thought, I can make it through. And then I can make it till spring. And then I'm going to play golf every day through the summer because I had enough money to, do that. And it was a really good thought, but that wasn't me.
No.
And so anyway, opportunities came about, and I wanted to start a consulting firm because it seems like when I had my own business, the manufacturing company, seemed like if you're successful, and I'm sure you experienced this before, people start, hey, Zach, you're successful. Could you give me some pointers? Right? Did you ever have that happen to you? People go to you
like a little bit. I think people getting started, and it depends on where you're at in business. It kind of like
they see you as successful, you know. So how did you do it? And so I had helped a lot of people at that point, and I thought, well, I can help people. And so I took a position with an organization that would help me learn a little bit more about deliverables and stuff like that. And after doing that for just a short period of time, I get a call from the president of the board of this organization called the Muncie Innovation Connector. Mm-hmm. And I saw that they were changing directors, and they needed somebody to kind of rescue their organization, and it was a business incubator. Yeah. And so I thought, oh my gosh, this is just for me. Yeah. A few weeks later, I started, and that was a little over 14 years ago that I started this journey here at the Innovation Connector. In the meantime, when I even actually owned my manufacturing business, I always wanted more, and so I actually bought into a franchise called Sport Clips, and I had 4 stores in Sport Clips, hair care. And during that time, I didn't need to be there every day. I was just more leading than managing. So I still had that going on too, but it wasn't full time. So eventually I sold all of those stores and never still got rich, and here I am still working, and, I'm going to be 66 years old pretty soon. And I'm not ready to slow down yet.
Yeah.
I tell people that I'm a millennial trapped in a baby boomer's body, and that's original, but it's true. Sometimes the body's not willing, but I still wake up at 2:00 every morning, on my own, usually about 2:04. Honestly, I think my body's regulated to that now.
What time are you going to sleep?
Well, I'd go to bed early, 9:00, 9:30. I get up, but then I stay up for about 2 hours, sit in my leather chair in the living room, and either I think, ponder, evaluate, read, I pray. I just sit there and I stay there for about 2 hours. And about 4:00, I go back to bed, and I sleep until I get up in the morning at 6:30, 7:00. And
that's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, but it's the quiet time. And I tell you what, during that time, I've had the best ideas, some ideas that have changed organizations here in Muncie. I was on the board of directors for this service called Hillcroft Services that helps mentally handicapped and physically handicapped adults. And I was the chair of the board because I was volunteering there. And I got the idea that we needed to grow. And, now they have we went to it was just a long story, but we did. And I led that whole thing through, and I had a vision in my mind of what could happen. And now they have a campus, and that was all in a vision that I had at like 2:05 in the morning.
How are you not falling asleep in your chair? I don't,
because there's so much exciting things going through my mind.
So
Now,
do you feel like almost like your mind is like, it's like revving up and then you have to like empty it out basically to even be able to sleep again?
yep. And that's exactly true. And then the other thing is when it revs up, it's like the cogs of wheels, the cogs go,
Yeah.
and I feel like my brain just starts like that. So when I wake up, my mind starts. Now, let me be real clear. I've had some of the best ideas during those times. And it's starting this, helping a program here. I'm not kidding. I've had the greatest ideas. On the flip side, I've also had some of the worst ideas during that time period too. So I want to be honest. It's not all good and such.
Yeah.
And things go through my mind, and I'll write things down. I'm in the process of writing a book right now. It's going to be a while yet, but all of that's come from my 2:00 in the morning dreaming and thoughts. I'd hate to say it's just dreaming because I call it visioning more than anything because I'm wide awake, Matter of fact, I'll get up and flip the cap of a Diet Coke or two and I'll drink those while I'm up, I'll go right back to bed. So yeah, it's crazy, but that's
bizarre. When did that start in your career?
probably about 10, 11 years ago.
Wow.
And I remember, it's probably, it's just maybe a couple months ago that I slept through the night one time. I couldn't believe it. Like when I woke up, like at 7 a.m, I'm going, oh my gosh, it's light. It's not 2:00 or whatever. But every once in a while it happens, but maybe once or twice a year that I sleep through the night.
Oh, that's bizarre. So you move, you're in this position at the Innovation Connector, and you have a lot of like great programs, and you're really here to help businesses get off the ground and give them kind of a safe space to grow. What can you give me 3? It can be 1 through 3 characteristics of what people need to be successful in business.
That's great. First of all, it goes back to if you want to start a business, first of all you have to know thyself.
Yeah.
What are your gifts, talents? What motivates you? What are your strengths and such? But then I also talk to people about, what is the problem that you want to solve or the opportunity that you see? Because sometimes, and this is a problem with some entrepreneur schools, is that, they try to teach people to be entrepreneurs, but they don't have any business idea, right?
Yeah.
But they want to go into business, so they want to start a business, but they don't have an idea. So, look around in normal everyday life and try to figure out a problem you can solve or something you can make better, or if there's an opportunity that faces us. For instance, if somebody is in high-end tech and they understand computers and the information technology systems, right now, something in AI that you can latch onto, artificial intelligence now's a good opportunity time, right? So first of all, look for problems, not seek a problem, but look for problems, and then start dreaming what solutions there are out there and what could possibly be a solution. Those are things that we start with. The other thing is everybody when they start a business or are growing a business, especially growing a business, like if I'd get 100 entrepreneurs in a room, I'd say, what do you need the most? 99 of them, I guarantee you would say, we need money. And the one who didn't say money just wasn't listening to the question. That's honest. I'm true. But we found out that most of the time it's not money that they need. It's a process. It's identifying that solution because most people don't have the money. So how do you make it work without the money? I remember your early days, you bootstrapped everything.
Yeah.
You were paying, taking this to pay this, to do this, to this. And so that's what you have to have. The other thing is, so as you look for the problem solution, I look at people who want to do good things or right things. Your motives have to be right.
Yeah.
If somebody says, I want to start my own business to get rich, probably not the best idea because, you're probably going to walk the poor journey for a while, right? I did. It wasn't, there were weeks and weeks and weeks and months that I didn't get paid because, the cash wasn't coming in.
Yeah, I think I did the math when I first started my business. I think I was making like $8 an hour. I was making. I worked like the only way, and I was married, I had a kid like right away, immediately. The only thing that like kept me afloat was the military income I had. I mean, I was making, and Muncie is like the cheapest place in the world to live, basically, in the United States at least. And I mean, looking back, it's like you can't have that like shiny thing like syndrome, because I remember so many times in business, it's like I just wanted to give up, and it's like, oh, like I could go make at that time like $40,000 a year working for Enterprise Rental Cars.
Oh my, yeah.
And it's like, wow, like, incredible. And there's a sense where you just can't quit. It's just like, I'm in this, and I think you can't quit in the way, if you're starting a business and you're going into more debt, you should stop. If it's not, if things aren't turning.
Yeah, and if it's not calculated.
Exactly. Yeah. But if you're bootstrapping it and like you're winning one week, you're losing another week, and you're not going into debt where you're paying interest, and you're working towards a goal, right, you just have to not quit.
You're exactly right. And that goes to one of the other things I was going to say was determination and resilience. Oh. I mean, you have to be determined. You have to resolve it in here that you're going to do it. And I'm not one of these believers, and I'm glad you said this, is that, I'm never going to quit. No, sometimes the best thing an entrepreneur can do is quit, right? But don't use the quitting as giving up your career or your life. Use it as a point to pivot. Maybe there's something else. And so, and there is always something else. And if you got that mindset, but you can, I've seen several people go down that rabbit hole, and it's ruined their lives.
Yeah, I was talking with somebody just like a couple of days ago, and he wanted to start his own business, and he likes technology and stuff. So I'm like, technology businesses are hard. And I said, you're a hard worker. I go, start a simple business to learn, and use that.
Great advice.
To eventually do a business that you enjoy. And I think what's hard in business is you think like, oh, I'm really passionate about this thing. And if you grow a business, the thing that you're really passionate about doing is not what you end up doing. You're managing people and other things. And I was just like, literally, if you can get a truck, a mower, and a weed whacker, and you just go and start building up that, you're going to learn how to do accounting. You're going to learn how to collect payment. You're going to learn how to sell. And in worst case scenario, you have a little bit of depreciation from your equipment.
And you got a revenue stream.
Like worst case scenario, if everything fails, like it's a very short fall. But I think so many people, they hear the saying, like, you got to spend money to make money. I go, that quote is right if you can also put in time.
Yeah, start with a little money to make a little money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, or you can spend a lot of time to make money.
The fallacy in when people see, they want to start a business, they're dreaming, and they see other people, they would, let's say they would look at me as I had my manufacturing company for years, and we did very well. I mean, after a number of years, we did very well. And someone could look at me and go, I want to start a business like you.
Yeah.
I want to be successful like you. And so they look at you where you're at right now. They didn't choose to join me in the first 2 years when, I was treading water with just this part of my mouth above the water, and going, is this going to make it? Yes, it is. I got to do this. Yeah. We got to hope. Well, here's this. But you've got to understand this. And who was it that said one time, you got to pay your dues.
Yeah, I go, you didn't see me, like, I remember when I first started, you didn't see me when I was having a full-on panic attack because I had payroll due in 3 or 4 days. I didn't have enough money in my account. It's like you didn't see it then. And that's why when I talk with people about business, I only tell them, it's like marriage. It's like, it's hard.
I know.
It's hard, and and it took like 10 years before it was like, oh, like there's like that freedom I was looking for 10 years ago. A little bit.
When I bought that part of the manufacturing company, there was one element, there was a product line that we bought, and the largest customer that we had in that product line, which was about almost 40% of our total business, because we just bought something to start, right? Yeah. It's like a springboard into something. 2 weeks after we bought it, on the Friday afternoon, So we started on Monday, went through the week, the whole next week. That Friday afternoon, I got a phone call from that customer, and they said, just want to let you know that in about 3 weeks, we're discontinuing that whole line. And there's 40% of my business. And I can remember going into the office Saturday. No one was there. And I sat in my little office, in my office chair. And I remember just shaking. I was just shaking. And I had to let myself go through that. I had to feel that. And then I felt like that the bell rang or the Rocky song came on, like, okay, what am I going to do? And from there, we pivoted into something that grew into something even better. Now, there were hard times with that. But, that was a very big setback for us. But you know what? The funny thing is, it was one of the best things that ever happened. Now I look back, then it was, oh, no, how am I ever going to do this? But again, there's a determination, a resiliency. And then there is an element that you have to have some faith in yourself. Owning a business, you said it's hard. You're exactly right. But it's also hard. Yeah. You have to really understand that this is the path I'm taking and I can do this. The other thing is you can't do it alone. Yeah. And I found out that, and this is the joy I get to face every day now, is I get to tell people you don't have to do it alone. I advise, so I'm in Muncie, Indiana. I have about 400 non-innovation connector clients outside our four walls that I've helped on a semi-regular basis over the years. Yeah. And really in the last year and a half. Over 400. And sometimes it's a pat on the back. Not too long ago, I had a gentleman who owned a business for 50 years in this town, very established. If I would say his name, 90% of the people in Muncie would recognize. That's how prominent it was. He sat in one of my chairs in front of my desk and cried for an hour and a half, bawled his eyes out. And because he was lonely. He didn't know who else to tell. He didn't know who to talk to. And I just said, you don't have to do this alone. There's so much help out there for you. And so that day I was a counselor, right? Yeah. And so in one way or the other, we can pour ourselves into other people. A couple of years ago, I did kind of a personal assessment. I did accounting of my own self. Who was I? And this was all started when my wife, who is, let me just tell you, she's not entrepreneurial in any way, okay? Yeah. She's a social worker, right? Yeah. And, but she's very understanding and very supportive. But I've done things in a different way. Zach, you and I are alike. We've not done things a conventional way all the time. No. And our paths, who's it? Yogi Bear said, when you come into a fork in the road, take it. That's me. That's us. We've just taken it, whatever. And they said, which one, left or right? No, we just took it. I don't know. We went left, and then sometimes you had to go right, and sometimes you had to make a path in between both of them or whatever. Yeah. But she asked me this and I don't know if she was just kidding, but boy, sometimes when someone asks you a question, it goes, bing. Yeah. And she said, why are you the way you are? And she wasn't being cruel. She just was asking me, why do you think you're the way you are? Yeah. I didn't know what to say. And I did about a year of introspection to me. And really, this was about the time that I started waking up in the morning. And I started pondering who I was, what really made me tick, what was Ted Baker about, what was going to be his so-called lifetime legacy, not just business, but who was I going to be, and what was it going to look like, and why was I doing what I was doing, and why was I the way I was? And I came to the conclusion that a lot of people would come to, and that is, I love to help people. It just so happens that my stage or my platform, my pulpit to do that is business development. Yeah. And so if I could maximize that time in front of people with business development, who I am and what makes me tick is, how do I help you? And so, there's a situation that I'm involved in Indiana and in a whole funding thing for incubators and tech parks, and I've been very influential and involved in this whole idea through state funding and legislation and such, and going through just a little bit of change with it. And I really understand it because I've been part of it. And just an hour before I came in to talk to you, I was in my office and I got a call. I got an email from somebody in Evansville who does similar things to me, but he's brand new. And he said, and so he asked me some questions. So I called him. His name's Patrick. I never met him before. I called him. I said, Patrick, I got your email. What can I help you with? And that's all I said is, and we were on, and I looked at it. We were on the phone 48 minutes and 12 seconds. And I ran him through the process of what he, where he's at, what he needs to do, and how he needs to process for the state economic development corporation, all this stuff. And I didn't have time. I mean, it wasn't part of my schedule that I wrote for the day, but Patrick needed help. And so I did that. And he said, Mr. Baker. And I said, please call me Ted. Mr. Baker, you don't know how much you've helped me out.
Yeah.
And I'm going, okay, thank you for, but that's what I do. And I thought to myself, well, that is what I do. A lot of people help people. A doctor, he may go into, or she may go into the medicine to say, I really want to help people. And so that person gets their giftings and their skills and their talents in that area, and they rock this world with that. But their main purpose is, I just want to help people. Yeah. And so everybody has a different way, and mine just happens to be business.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, know yourself. And I think that question, that question is good. Is like, why am I the way that I am? And I'll be honest, I ask that question a lot, because I mean, it's a lifelong question. It changes, and there's stuff that fuels that from how you're raised and experiences, and in business you get burned. I think what's so hard.
Really? No,
oh yeah, I mean,
many times.
You feel a different sense of injustice, I think, and that's really important, because if you forget why you're doing it, it can get really hard to stay focused.
That is so right on. That is so good. Thank you for saying that, because that is so true. And that's part of why you have to know thyself.
Yeah.
I always tell people, know thyself. And they look at me like, what? But it's something I just remember to say. And, I'm going through some of that. I don't say crisis now, but, I'm going through another stage that as I am getting ready to turn 66 years old, am I going to retire? A lot of people by my age are already retired. My wife and I have both had, and we're about the same age, and we both had this goal that we would work until what's called full retirement age, and for us, that's 66 and a half. And the only reason that's not like we have to, but it's just like a benchmark for us. And so, next April, I'm going to be 66 and a half. And so, and she's going to retire in February, because she's going to be 66 and a half. And she's meeting that, and she's going to duck out as quick as she can, right? Yeah. And so, I'm looking at that, and so I'm thinking, am I going to retire? And so we spent some time together talking and praying and just pondering this and considering it. And after a while, we both looked at each other, and she said, you're not ready to retire.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I think you're right. But she said, you're not done yet. And I'm thinking, man, that's so true. She feels like she's done, but she's got, grandkids that she wants to involve with in some other things. And so she said, you're just not done yet. Keep helping people. And so, kind of came to the conclusion that if I'm able to still help people, I'm still productive, and not just productive, but impactful in others' lives.
Yeah.
And my organization will keep me around. I'm going to keep doing this for a good number of years. And I'm working on some things to help the transition that when I leave, and there's some technology things and some little things internally that we're doing, but, and I would never just leave it in a lurch, but yeah, so maybe retirement is something that we, it's a modern day thing, but, I don't want to retire. I don't know what I would retire. I don't want to retire from something. I'm going to have to retire to something.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. So, to end in each segment, I like to ask people, and to end this segment, you've lived and you've worked in a very unique platform. What do you do in your day-to-day that fills your cup? If you've had a stressful day or you're at empty, what are a few disciplines or things you do to fill your cup?
Good. That's a great question.
Because as an entrepreneur, it's empty a lot.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and we need to ask each other that question a lot too.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, so we're empty nesters. So it's important for me to go home and to be with my wife. Okay. Now that doesn't mean we like goo at each other all the time, and but we're home, and like we usually eat dinner together every night. That's really important to us. Okay, to be together like that. But we're both unique and individual people too. So it's not uncommon for her to stay out in the living room and watch her show, and I'll go in and watch a game, in my room. But I'm home. So for me is to leave work and to leave it. So about 5 years ago, I made a conscious effort to, I'll just tell you this. I don't have a computer at home.
Yeah.
I don't keep one at home. I don't have one at home. I have my phone in case an emergency or whatever, but I don't have a computer there because guess who would be tempted to go,
Yeah.
because there's lots of stuff I could be doing. And so for me, when I'm home, I'm home.
Yeah.
And so that's very good. I also, I like to do things with my wife. And so, we'll do things with the family and such, but those are the things that refresh me. I usually take time every day to be by myself, to empty myself in prayer. I do that every night. Yeah. It's just my time, and it's nothing like, I don't put I don't walk or put myself in sackcloth and ashes, and it's just my personal quiet time.
Yeah.
And that's good because I got to unload it, and some of that's refreshing to yourself. So the other thing is a number of years ago, we were at church, and our pastor shared a 3-part series on what's called the Sabbath, or day of rest. Now, that can mean a lot of different things.
Yeah.
But as he was talking about, and it was a whole 3-part series. Usually you hear like a tidbit in a message. And he went into the history of it and even the modern day idea. But my wife and I said, well, let's just take a day off. And so the best day for us is Sunday because, and so we literally take Sunday off. And whereas if I took a nap, I'd feel guilty. And she sometimes would make me feel guilty, and I would make her feel guilty for, but we are guilt-free now. And so we just enjoy the day off. And that's been probably one of the best things for me. Now, it sets up the whole week. And, it was really interesting because I remember I used to come over to the office every Sunday evening for maybe 3 hours, 3 hours. And it was like I'm preparing for the next week.
Yeah.
Right? And I always thought that was very important. So when I started this time of just not working, I got real anxious inside. It's like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do for the week? How am I going to get set? Stuff. And I came to this conclusion: it's never going to be done. There's always going to be more to do.
Yeah.
And so, and that's the life of an entrepreneur. And we're always thinking. Those gears are always running. And so, I guess maybe the thing that I do most in answering your question directly is I give myself freedom not to engage when I don't have to. Again, if on Sunday there was something that somebody really needed me and it was something that needed to be done, I'm not legalistic that I wouldn't help people, right? We're here to serve. And so for me, that's just the way it works. And but I think the biggest thing was the conscious effort not to take my computer home. Yeah. Because although it's tempting, and stuff like that, but it's just nice not having one. And so,
I think with that discipline too, you're like, well, if there was an emergency, what could I do to prevent that emergency? And it's funny when we think we're doing things to be somewhat proactive, but it's like the real things we needed to do are in our day-to-day processes and SOPs and everything else. Mm-hmm. It's like, what can I do so I don't need to feel like there's going to be an emergency?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting. So that first Sunday was like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to do it. But then as that next week went on, I started kind of preparing for the next week during the week. Yeah. For that next, before. Yep. And so, there are processes that we get into. And, before I leave, it's Friday afternoon here. Before I leave, I will review my week for next week. I've already done it, but I'm going to renew that and review it and say, where am I at? What have I got to do? Next Thursday, I know I've got a big strategic planning session with a local company. I'm going to spend 8 hours with them on developing their next strategic plan for their organization. Yeah. And so okay, now, Ted, what do you have to do to finish preparing for that? So that's next Thursday. So, I still have a few days next week, but those are the conscious things that I think about. But I've already thought about those, and I know, so I'll look and I'll know what I have to do. I'll probably come in on Saturday because that's not Sunday. So
Yeah.
but anyway, it's, the best thing I can say is, enjoy what you do. Yeah. One time recently, and my wife's got a hard job. She's, works with families in crisis and such, and kids in crisis. And like, she's tired. And one day, we woke up and kind of laying in bed just for a moment, and she said, I don't want to go to work today. And just out of my mouth, without even thinking, I said, I can't wait to get to my office. And so she said, there you have it. That's why you're not retiring. Yeah. Because I still love it. And so anyway, but I would like to encourage people, someone who's listening or someone who is engaged, if you want to start a business, or even if you just want to grow your business or whatever, find out those things that, know thyself, find out what makes you tick. And then be supportive of other people. And no matter what you do, don't walk your journey alone. And I'm not saying it has to be your spouse or even your best friend. There are people, tons of people, that are there to help you. And there may be the person you never would dream of, the person to help you. Some people who have talked sense into me, or people who have no clue about business. Yeah. So do that and walk that journey. And I've never been one of these people that I have every step planned. You and I know that is impossible, right? Yeah. At the same time, I do know that I'm responsible for my next step. And my whole goal in life is to make sure that next step is not off a cliff. Then I'm okay. So,
yeah, that's great advice. And just thank you for everything you've done for me. And I know there's tons of other business owners, especially around here, that have been impacted by your hard work and your help. So I really appreciate it.
It's been a joy. And when I look back, when I do retire and I look back, I don't know what retirement might even look like, but when I look back, I'm going to smile. I'm going to say yes. And, and your success, and, I just had a little bit, we just talked and chatted and dreamed together, but those things are what bring joy to me. And so those are multiplied time and time again. And you see people on the street and you don't remember them, and they go, my business is still going great. I'm going, thank you. So, well, thanks for having me, Zach.
That's awesome. Thanks for being on here. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right. Good.
Okay.
Yeah, it was great.